What's up everyone, Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have yet another collection update courtesy of me shopping way too much on distros. This one is predominantly stuff from Sevard Records. I hit up their distro, which is kind of a pain to navigate as far as CDs, but I found some really cool stuff. I literally, not too long ago, just got done killing a wasp or bee or stingy thing that just got in my house. So a little on edge about that. I'm kind of wondering where that came from because I was in my basement and all of a sudden there was a wasp. Again, I'm a little worried where it came from, and I am kind of watching around just to see if there's another one flying around. But yeah, let's just get into it. And yeah, if you see me eyeballing stuff out of the corner, I might just be looking for another one of those things just in case they're trying to come back and murder me. Burial, the Aeons of Horror. This came out in 2020 on Despise the Sun Records. This is a compilation of all of this Italian death doom band's material. 2 demos and an EP. And it sounds almost kind of like Finnish death metal. In fact, I thought it was a Finnish band when I first heard it until I looked up and said, oh, they're from Italy. Okay. As you can tell by the cover, some fierce Lovecraftian vibes. I gotta say though, it's kind of all over the place as far as like death doom. It kind of sounds more like Entombed to start out with, and then it sort of slowly shifts into more like autopsy, mental funeral sort of stuff. You get a lot of dramatic shifts in terms of like up-tempo and slowed down stuff, especially when you get down to the EP section, which I think starts at track 4. I can't quite remember, but the EP material is a lot more on the death doom side. The faster, more up-tempo stuff starts to dissipate. As far as like recording quality across this comp, it only really varies when you get down to the second demo, which is the last 3 tracks, I believe. They get a little bit muddier, they're not as well produced, but I mean, the music's still pretty solid. Kind of had some issues with the vocals. They kind of remind me of Barnes, but not like good Barnes, like Cannibal Corpse, but more like almost Now Barnes, which is an acquired taste, we'll call it that. But overall, the music was really good, and I would definitely like to hear more from this band because they have a pretty solid comp here. So yeah, definitely check it out. Carnal Tomb, Descend EP. This came out in 2020 on Final Gate Records. This is a German old school death metal band. Fierce nods to like incantation and like just kind of really swampy old school death metal. This was actually an early review for us when we were just starting off the channel. I believe Tommy and I reviewed their full-length Abhorrent Veneration, and it was pretty solid. And I saw these guys pretty much in the collection of stuff on Sevard Records, like, oh, I remember those guys. That album was pretty solid. And picked this up, and not much has changed. This is just straight up old school death metal. It doesn't really like, you know, jump off the page like, oh wow, this is like something new or flashy, but it's really good. It's really well executed. I mean, if you love old school 90s death metal that's very cavernous and ugly, but you know, has kind of like this raw, dingy sort of sound, you'll probably dig this. A little bit of the death doom feel to it, some really dreary melodies. It's a pretty solid EP. It's only 3 songs, so it's short, but it's pretty good, and you should check it out. Centinex, Decadence, Prophecies of Cosmic Chaos. This is this Swedish death metal band's 7th album, came out on Candlelight USA, or at least it was distributed through Candlelight to get here. This was a little bit of a surprise for me. I've been slowly sort of like picking up the pieces in terms of going back and collecting all of Centinex's stuff. I really loved their earlier stuff. It kind of had that old school Swedish death metal feel, you know, very Entombed, Dismember, you know, that sort of thing. This, when I picked it up, this is definitely a shift more towards like the Gothenburg sound. This right away sounded so much like At the Gates, I had to like do a double look. And the next track after that, I mean, we're talking about the opening track, then the next track sounded like Amon Amarth. So this was, you know, maybe kind of a transitional album for him. I know the one before it, or possibly the one after it, it was a little bit different. This one just really seemed to latch closer to Gothenburg than it did to Stockholm. This came out in 2004, so I kind of get it. At this point, the whole mellow death scene was really getting big. It was really catching fire. But there are still like elements of different music on here. There's a heavy thrash influence on here. Vocally, it's pretty interesting. I had to look it up because it sounded like there were 2 distinct vocalists, but It's actually just one. And it's really odd because, I mean, it really does sound like it's two different people, not the same guy doing it, which, I don't know, I just thought it was really interesting. Now, this band also features the bassist from Demonical, which Demonical is awesome Swedish death metal. I absolutely love those guys. But this is pretty good. I'm still collecting, again, all the other stuff that I'm missing from Centinex, and I'm finding there are some that are kind of hit or miss, but I mean, when you have, you know, older bands, you'll get spotty parts in their discography. I don't think this is bad, though. I think it's just kind of unexpected in terms of what I thought I was getting versus, you know, what I did get. This is a solid mellow death album. I don't think this is straight up Swedish death metal in terms of like the Stockholm sound, but it's good. So just know that. So yeah, if you love At the Gates and Dark Tranquility and Early in Flames, check this out. It's pretty solid. Corpus Mortal, a new species of Deviant. This is their second album, came out in 2007. This is a Danish death metal act. I actually brought their follow-up to this, Fleshcraft, up in a underrated death metal albums, and I really enjoyed that one, and that was the only one I owned. And I saw this one and was like, well, I hear their earlier albums are even better, and partially right. I kind of like Fleshcraft a little bit more. That might just be because I'm more used to it, but this still offers pretty much the same thing that did, except I think the production has some slight tweaks. The drums sound a little flat on here. I don't know what it is. Like, I think it's the bass drums. They just kind of have that kicking pillows sort of sound. It doesn't sound like it's a big impact. And song-wise, it doesn't get more dynamic until like some of the later songs, but what these guys do is still really good. It's straight up death metal. It's very kind of Floridian, but kind of mixed that with like Decapitated, because there's a lot of cool, like really badass chuggy syncopation in these songs. And these guys are flying. I mean, there's tons of blast beats on here, but I like the distinct pockets of groove. These guys know how to write a hook, and it's just nasty and heavy and aggressive, and that's a lot of the things I like about death metal. A little cut and dry, but still really good. I'm glad I picked it up. I definitely want to get their first album because I hear that one's also good. But yeah, solid release. I dig this one. I think Fleshcraft might be a little bit better. I don't know, again, more used to it. And I kind of want to pick up their first one too because I hear that one is also good. So yeah, I'll probably be on the lookout for that. So yeah, definitely check this band out in general, but yeah, check this one out too. Escarnium, Excruciating Existence. This is this band's debut full length. They are from Brazil. This came out on Soul Evisceration Records, Distro Rock Records. It's been distributed a lot on a lot of labels. That's what I'm getting at here. But I actually picked up their second album, Interitus, which is intense. I absolutely love that album. And I saw this and it was like, well, I got to get this one too. And this one is also great. I like how absolutely brutal this band is. Like, they are insanely heavy. It is sort of a mix of like suffocation levels of brutality and then that Chrysian speed. That is a hell of a concoction right there. I mean, I absolutely love both of those bands. And dude, just riffs for days. The drums are absolutely pummeling on this. This is just a flat out intense listen from front to back. There's even some really cool old school death metal touches that are a little bit more like groovy and kind of punky. Great album. I absolutely love this one. I think Interitus might be a little bit better, but again, that's kind of like Corpus Mortal. I've had more listening time with Interitus, and I really went fucking hard on that one when I got it because I was completely blown away. This one is also incredible. I strongly recommend this if you are a fan of just intense, heavy, like just nasty death metal, because this is just relentless. But yeah, this is an absolutely awesome band. I think they might still have an EP out there I don't have yet, which, believe me, I will hunt down because I've loved everything I've picked up from them, which now includes this because this is a flat out banger and you should definitely check it out. Coffin, with a K. Nailed into the Coffin, with a C. This is the first demo from this Estonian death metal band. Fiercely old school, very raw, and very Swedish sounding. Now it starts off with an intro, which on demos, I don't know, I kind of rather you skip the long intros. It's an entire track of like church bells and they add in like some keys later. It's cool, but it goes on too long. But, you know, getting down to the metal part was the important part. Now the production on this is rough. It is a demo, so, you know, kind of give them a bit of a pass there. The bass drum on this is absolutely huge, and the bass itself is just snarling on this. So when it comes down to the mix, it definitely gets a little muddy. It's fun, it's very riffy, it's fiercely old school. Again, like lots of like, you know, Swedish death metal, maybe like a little bit of Autopsy in there in terms of that style. But the thing that kind of drove me nuts about it, it really isn't like tremendously interesting. There's a lot of like recycled riffs on here and they aren't particularly interesting. Now granted, this is a demo. This is their first shot. I think there's definitely potential in this band to get a lot better. I mean, they already have an absolutely kick-ass logo. You know, the artwork's pretty sick, and the core of their sound is good. I just think they need to kind of, you know, reach out a little bit, you know, kind of, you know, find some more interesting driving riffs, because that seems to be the only thing really holding them back. Like, you know, even as a first demo, this is a pretty solid sounding demo. So yeah, overall, I mean, I think it's pretty decent. It's not something that really kind of jumps off the page for me, but I still recommend checking it out. Don't just take my word for it. I might just be being a picky shit once again, but yeah, definitely check them out. It's, you know, again, a nice solid first offering, and, you know, I'm excited for things to come. All right, we got the 2011 split EP between Mammoth Grinder and Hatred Surge. Now, I guess I'll just go band by band on here. The first 3 tracks are Mammoth Grinder, and the opening track, Pulverizer, absolutely lives up to its name. God, I think this is some of their best stuff, and just these 3 songs, they just absolutely crush. And in terms of Mammoth Grinder in this facet, it is only 2 people on this one. I believe it's the drummer from Power Trip, I can't think of his name right now, and their original drummer. And they absolutely just run through all 3 of these songs and just pummel you. The production's great, the guitar tone is absolutely nastier than hell. D-beat, punk, big obituary style riffs. Absolutely killer. And then Hatred Surge has the last 4 tracks on here, and it is just like punky, ugly, power violence, grindcore. It's really interesting because you get like big groovy sections, and then you get these like Nails style freakouts on here. All this stuff I really liked, except for the last track, Supernova, which ends too soon and then just goes into a really, really long outro that is just bleeding noise. Now, both of these bands feature Chris Olsch, who is the guy that I couldn't remember for Mammoth Grinder. He also plays in Hatred Surge, and I believe Hatred Surge is split up, and Mammoth Grinder, I believe, is currently on hiatus, which is disappointing on 2 different fronts there, because I really liked both of these, especially Mammoth Grinder. I'm already a huge fan of Mammoth Grinder. But hopefully, either one of these projects will get back together and put out some new music, because, dude, absolutely awesome stuff. I, of course, favored the Mammoth Grinder side just because I'm a huge fan of that band, but both sides of this are absolutely killer, and you should definitely check it out. Mordbrand Necro Psychotic EP. This came out in 2011 on Deathgasm Records. This is the debut EP solo. They had a split before this from the band, which actually features former members of God Macabre, which is an awesome one-off death metal band from Sweden. We actually did a retro review of them not too long ago, and this is a band I actually discovered courtesy of the Metalhead box. I got one of their albums in a real early one. It might have been even before we were recording anything for the channel, and I really enjoyed it. And I saw this and was like, well, I'm still missing that. So I decided to pick it up, and this is definitely a rough start. Now, there's still some carryover from God Macabre in terms of their sound. It still has like a lot of that cool Swedish death metal sound. The mix on this is a little rough. This definitely sounds more raw than the albums that would follow. The vocals are very out in front, and they're very distorted. Like, they have a weird distortion on them at all times, and it doesn't fit. And songwriting wise, I think they were still kind of finding their way. Like, they were still trying to find a new sound, or at least kind of recapture the old sound, but they seemed a little lost, and they would get a lot better. Like, the albums I have by them that came after this, absolutely killer stuff. This is maybe like a little bit of growing pains, I guess. It's not without its cool moments, but they are fewer and far between in terms of their other releases. But still, I would recommend checking them out. I'd definitely check out their later stuff. That is for damn sure. But yeah, check this one out. Draw your own conclusions. I might just be being picky again. That is kind of my nature here. But still, I strongly recommend checking it out. Murder Made God, Irreverence. This came out in 2013 on Brutal Bands Records. This is this Greek technical brutal death metal band's debut album. I actually have 2 of their albums, and I enjoyed them, and I figured I might as well check out what they had earlier. And this was, I believe, you know, reasonably priced once again on Sevard Records website, and picked it up, and it's very Beneath the Masquery, except not as technical. Actually, it's kind of an interesting thing on here. It's not super technical. It's very heavily syncopated, and the drums are triggered as hell, but I wouldn't say like the riffing is super technical at all times. It's very chuggy. That's kind of the thing. They find cool syncopated chugs, kind of do the decapitated thing, except Unfortunately, this is very sterile. Like, it almost doesn't feel human. It feels very robotic and kind of wiped of any sort of, like, grit whatsoever. Now, granted, this is their first album, and I do think they got better, especially in terms of, like, atmosphere and varying up the riffing, but this one, they really just kind of labored the start-stop riffing. It's all very staccato, and again, it's very just kind of dry, and I don't like that. I need, death metal to actually sound gritty and like it was made by people, not an algorithm. But again, their other stuff I think is a lot better, especially their newer album, but I still recommend checking this out. Again, there seems to be a bit of a thing about me being picky on this one, but I mean, that is me. But again, the other theme is, I'm going to say, check it out for yourself, draw your own conclusions. You may actually really dig this. This could be your favorite album. It just, wasn't mine, but I do like this band, and I still strongly recommend their other releases for sure. So yeah, definitely check them out. Oppressor, Solstice of Oppression. This is this band's debut album from 1994 from Chicago. This was a technical death metal band, I guess, kind of old school death metal too. Very interesting sound. I have to say that right out of the gate. It reminds me a lot of Suffocation, and then like mix that with like later Death. There's a really interesting contrast between like cleaner passages and like heavier passages. No clean vocals. All the vocals are harsh in here, but you have a lot of clean guitar play that's, I don't know, kind of like jazz fusion-y, like, like softer sections on Centinex Focus. Now, I first heard about this band years ago. I think it was on a Overture record sampler for their second one, and I really enjoyed what I heard, but I never managed to get around to getting any of their albums. Saw this one, I was like, well, it's time. I need to get some of their albums, because I was actually listening to this band around like the time I discovered Cannibal Corpse. So yeah, it was quite some time ago. Now, they only lasted from 1990 to 1999. They only put out 3 albums, and this seems to be the one that's the most celebrated in their catalog, though I do want to get all of them. But it's really interesting. I think there's some really cool standout tracks in here, especially the song Genocide. I really like the just interesting song structure in that. Tons of cool angular riffs. The production is fiercely 90s. And I don't think they really held on to like the more tech death elements. They kind of moved to like more of a straightforward style later. But this is a really solid album. It's definitely an interesting point in the 90s in terms of like, bands that started sounding like Nocturnus and such, in terms of like, the more technical death metal. Also kind of fits in with a little bit of the brutal death metal stuff that was coming out, namely Broken Hope. And, that was another Midwest death metal act, I'm pretty sure, that was around, and they may have even toured with them, I don't know. But yeah, pretty awesome release. I'm definitely glad I picked this up. Again, I was missing this in my collection. I definitely wanted to get more of their albums, and I was surprised to actually find this one, because I was reasonably sure, since I liked it and it was underground, it would be out of print and someone would be asking like $1,000 for a copy. Luckily, that was not the case, and I got it, and you should definitely check it out. Taphos, Come Ethereal Somberness. This came out in 2018. This is this band's debut album on Blood Harvest Records. There it is. My thumb was over it. This is a Danish death metal band that loves Morbid Angel and Leprosy and a little bit of Suffocation. That was pretty much the whole thing I got when I was listening to it. Was, man, dude, these guys love big Morbid Angel riffs. I love the sound on this. The riffs are absolutely brilliant. Granted, you can tell kind of what bands were influencing them. I didn't care, because they were well executed. The vocals actually have almost a more blackened delivery too, which I really enjoyed as well. The drum work on here is absolutely killer, and I absolutely loved all the melodies that are on A Manifest of Trepidation. That song absolutely bangs. I actually picked up a collection of demos from this band not too long ago. I believe it was also issued on Blood Harvest Records, and I absolutely loved it in terms of just like that raw sound. And they still capture that on this full length. It doesn't sound like a demo. It definitely sounds like a mastered album, but it's still very raw, gritty, dark, almost kind of cavernous in a sense, but not too much on the reverb there. Killer release. I strongly recommend it. Go find it, go jam it. It's nice and heavy and dark and all the best stuff about death metal. I love it. Definitely check this out. Heads for the Dead, Into the Red. That rhymes. This is the second album from this international death metal supergroup on Transcending Obscurity. Now, forgive me, I'm gonna have to read this because I can't remember all these names. Let's see, we have Johnny Pedersen of Wombath, and he plays, I believe, guitar and bass. I guess he used to play all the instruments. And then we have Rolf Hauber, who is the vocalist from Revel in Flesh. And we have Ed Warby on drums from Aeon. Or Aeon? I don't know. Anyway, this is straight up old school death metal, very much in the vein of a lot of stuff that came out of Stockholm, again, Entombed, Dismember, with really interesting vocals. I gotta say the vocals on here are kind of different in a sense. There is like a good like low roar that's predominantly the main delivery, but there are these high shrieks on here that really remind me a lot of the higher shrill screams you'd hear from Peter Tägtgren from Hypocrisy, though I think Peter does them a little bit better. Sometimes those shrieks on here, sometimes are really good and they add a lot to it, and then sometimes they just kind of feel out of place, and when there's not enough like behind it in terms of like a big guitar riff or anything like that, you can hear how dry they sound and it just sounds like it hurts. But I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff on here that's definitely very reminiscent of Bloodbath. There's lots of big killer DB drives and high energy songs. I gotta say, sometimes the guitar tone can get a little weird. I believe the song The Seance, I don't know, there's something about it that just sounds like the amp was busted. The speaker was blown out or something, but they just kept rocking with it and they recorded. It's like, yeah, that sounds cool. But I don't know, it doesn't sound right. And there is a cover on here of Darkthrone's Transylvanian Hunger, which I'm still not a huge fan of, but at least this has better production. Yeah, I know I'm probably still gonna get shit for that, but I still can't get past that one. But overall, this is a pretty solid album. I definitely want to check out their first one. It's, you know, kind of like worship and tribute, I guess, in terms of like a lot of the old school death metal that these guys probably all got into. But it's pretty well executed, and I'm definitely willing to go check out more of their stuff. So definitely check this out. Mongols Cross, Arcana, Scrying, and Revelation. This is their third album and their first one with Proscriptor from Absu on vocals. And I'm not entirely sure if he is a permanent member because, I mean, he's from Texas and this band is from Australia. You know, third release from these guys too, and they've had pretty much the same vocalists, I believe, on all the other albums, all two of them. So I don't know if this is just like a special like album with just him or this is the start of a new chapter with them. Either way, it now kind of sounds more like Absu. The last album before this I really liked. It was very riffy. This is blackened thrash metal, so riffy is really an important thing there. This is still very riffy, but there's a little bit more to the atmosphere in here, and Proscriptor's vocals are very different than the previous frontman. He's very dramatic, and you can't miss him on here because the vocals are very out in front. He is yelping and screaming and shrieking, and he's very dramatic in here. Sometimes it works, sometimes it seems like it's a little bit much though. Musically though, I really like this. I think they found like a little bit more in terms of the atmosphere and kind of balance that out with the riffs. There's a lot more harmonies on here. And I'm talking like kind of 80s, like new wave of British heavy metal harmonies on here. There's something about this album that feels very like occult evil, but like 80s occult evil. And I really kind of latched onto that. I think this is notably more melodic in general than the last one, and I really like it. Though, again, it's kind of odd coming from the last one, which I really liked, that was also melodic, but I think it was a little bit more riffy, and I like the vocals a bit better. Not that Proscriptor's bad, I own a lot of Absu. I don't know, I just think maybe he might be an odd fit for this band because, again, now it's starting to sound more like Absu, but again, that might just be because it's Proscriptor. Either way though, I did really dig this one, and I strongly recommend checking it out. It's solid black and thrash with a buttload of fucking melody, which, hey, that's pretty awesome. So yeah, definitely check it out. And finally, one giant palate cleanse here. Depeche Mode, Songs of Faith and Devotion, live. I generally don't go for live albums, but I don't have much in the way of live stuff from Depeche Mode, and this is one of my favorite non-metal bands ever. I have jammed like Violator and, well, Songs of Faith and Devotion so many damn times. They are practically part of my childhood, teenage years, 20s, all the way to now. I've been listening forever. So yeah, I saw this one in the used bin and was like, yeah, why not? Let's just check it out. And of course it's really good because it's Depeche Mode. They're awesome. I mean, it is just Songs of Faith and Devotion, the entire album live, but I mean, I got Walking in My Shoes, which is one of my favorite songs by them, and I Feel You, which is amazing. The whole album is great, and I got to hear it live, and that's pretty much all I got to say about that because I just wanted it. It was cheap, and I love Depeche Mode, and I will probably continue to love Depeche Mode all the way till Depeche Mode is no more, and then I'll probably love them after that too. So yeah, you've never jammed Depeche Mode, jam some Depeche Mode. They're good. It's definitely not metal, like, at all, but it's good. So check them out. So that knocks out another one, and I'm going to lay off the distros for a little bit and give you some time to catch up. But we are going to continue to work on a whole bunch of other stuff. I mean, tons of reviews. We had our votes up, and now the next discography rankings are getting ready to form up, and Napalm Death is going to be the one that launches us off, and I can't wait to do that one because I absolutely love that band. And of course, we're on Patreon now, so if you want to throw us some love there will be a link below to go check that out. We're going to have podcasts on there as an exclusive offering on there, and of course, whatever else we decide to throw on there, because yet another form we can get busy on and throw out cool metal content on. And yeah, I'm actually pretty damn excited about it. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We will catch you later.